Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Denver, and then turn this off. Sorry about that. I want my beer ringing.
So tonight, let's see. So tonight, yeah, this is working. Can you hear me over there? Can you guys hear me fine? Like doing this?
Yeah.
You know
I
what?
can talk loud too.
We're going to talk loud. All right. Okay. Cool. Well, again, I'm Tony. Let's see, with Startup Grind Denver. How many people is first time Startup Grind? Oh my gosh. The whole group.
I've been before.
Yes, I know. Thank you. Yeah. So have I. So I've been before too. I know Peter's been here and Ryan's been here. So those of you who don't know who we are, just real quick, we're a group that's got directors like myself all over the country. There's over 100 plus of us in 100 different cities around the globe. And what we do is we interview wonderful people like Ingrid Alongi, I'll introduce in a moment, and then post them on the website. And we're really looking to inspire, educate, and connect with the folks that we're talking with and folks like yourselves. So that's kind of what we're all about. Again, started about 5 or 6 years ago in Silicon Valley, where the world revolves around. For those of you who don't know that, the universe revolves around Silicon Valley, right? Until we can prove it different here in Denver. And it's just been growing and growing like crazy. So it's been a great opportunity to meet lots of people like yourselves and interview some cool folks. And I deal with a lot of different folks around the world that are doing these exact types of things with entrepreneurs and thought leaders and really cool people. So with that said, I want to say thank you all for coming. Just a reminder for next month, again, we do it pretty much every second Thursday of the month. And we'll continue to do that. So next month we have Nancy Phillips from BioWest, who just sold for $1 billion. I don't know if you heard about that, but they're doing very well. She's very happy. And then we'll have Will McClone from Uber next, and then more to come in November, December, and going into next year. So look at our site, and you'll see who's coming up. So tonight we have Ingrid Alongi. And Ingrid, basically just a quick introduction for her, and once I get done introducing her, I want everybody to scream and holler and clap, okay? So when I get done. So she's Boulder native, went out to California and became a developer, and then all of a sudden she was riding around her wonderful bike one day and thought she needs to come back to Boulder. So she came back to Colorado. Yay! I'm so glad. And she's the co-founder and CEO of Quick Labs. So let's hear a big round of applause for Ingrid Alongi.
Thank you all for coming. I'm really glad it's a nice small group because I like it better when I can make eye contact with everyone. So thank you so much for coming.
Great. So we wanted to start out initially with our interviews, talking about kind of where you came from. So we know you're originally from Boulder. So start these out the same way. Start with kind of where you were, you rolled to Boulder, kind of rule us up to about college.
Yeah.
And in doing that, I'm going to ask you some questions about some significant events and how those.
Well, it's funny you say that because a lot of what I did before college was actually quite significant. It really helped me later as I was building a business. So I grew up in Boulder and I fell in love with cycling and started racing when I was 12. I think when I was 11, I saw there were kids racing downtown Boulder, and I was like, kids can race? That's so cool. My dad was racing at the time. Racing was really big in the 80s. He actually was an extra in American Flyers, so he was a double for the Russian guy. Well, so he did all the riding for the actor.
How many have seen that movie?
Russian guy.
Anybody?
American
Fly?
Flyers.
Oh, come on, go see it. It's good.
It's really fun. So something really fun about the teamwork of the sport that I really liked. It's an endurance sport. You get to be outside. You get to go fast. So there's a lot of things that I was really drawn to. But you also learn a lot about self-discipline. Try that. Okay, how's that?
You guys hear a little better?
Oh, that's good.
I can adjust the volume too, or what have you, so.
Cool.
Sorry.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Good interaction. So yeah, it was like, it had all these really great elements. And the other thing about cycling that I really liked was there's a little bit of this kind of war stories aspect to it. There's nothing like going on a ride with friends and then afterwards having these really fun conversations about, did you see what I just did on that turn? Or did you see that awesome move that I made coming up the climb? So there's this really great camaraderie and teamwork mixed with just the outdoors and everything. So I really took to cycling and actually was on the U.S. national team in high school. So I spent a lot of my time in Colorado Springs at training camps and things like that, hoping to become an Olympic cyclist. Unfortunately, there was not a lot of support for women in the sport, and I was probably third or fourth best in the U.S., but I might as well have been last. So when it came time, I did take a year off before I went to college. But after about a year, I realized it might be better to do something more with my brain. Another funny thing about it was back then there wasn't the internet, so there was a lot of downtime in between racing and training where you're supposed to really recover and rest and put your feet up. And I found myself getting really bored during those times. And you're almost a little too tired to read a heavy book. So it's kind of missing this intellectual stimulation. So after a year of realizing I was only going to make $200 a month as a professional cyclist, if that, it's time to go back to college. And I did. And thank goodness. But something about being in the sport at a young age taught me many things about how to persevere when starting a company. There's a lot of demands on you when you're taking on such a big commitment. And there's a lot of things that you aren't going to expect. And so being able to handle stress, being able to handle being tired, being able to work with a team were all these great lessons I learned from cycling that I was able to apply later on.
So when you were out, I'll just talk about that. So when you were out in, when did you go out to California?
So California was grad school, so I actually went to the University of Colorado Boulder for undergrad, and because I was a cyclist, I was a kinesiology major and I wanted to do sports medicine. So I did all of the science and math stuff that I needed to go to med school, and just realized that the thought of blood and poking people was starting to really make me think, was this the right thing for me? And then I was always asking the wrong questions in biology. So instead of like memorizing all of the things, I was thinking, why are the things like they are? So just...
What was the answer to that?
Well, the answer was philosophy. So I switched majors to
Okay.
philosophy. Or I could ask all
Very good.
those questions and get good grades for it, rather than getting a bad grade because I was asking the wrong questions. So I ended up doing a double major in women's studies and philosophy. And actually at the time, women's studies was not an official major at CU. It was an American studies major with a certificate in women's studies. So I spent my graduation actually protesting that I wasn't going to get women's studies written on my diploma. Was really important to me. So soon after that, I decided that didn't quite know what to do for a career, and what do you do when you don't know what you're going to do with your life? Well, nowadays you start a company, but back in those days you go to grad school. It is a little bit, and it's still a little bit. Sound experts in the house. Is it because I'm too close to that?
Did you try it on the ground? It's not on you.
We do have a sound expert in the house.
There you go.
Right there.
The shot, right? I'm a sound expert.
Good.
Okay, good. So I ended up going to, I wanted to get, I was really passionate about women's issues. So another kind of thing that stemmed from my experience in cycling is that being on the national team and racing and training with the men's team and the women's team, we trained together all the time. It baffled me that as hard as the women worked, that people saw our racing as either boring or that Europe wasn't in the budget. I just could not wrap my head around those facts because I was like, we're all training the same amount of time. I don't get it. I don't get why one is considered better than the other. And so that sort of inquisitiveness in myself was always something that's kind of pushed me along. I would say that my skepticism, even of experts, even if you're an expert, I'm always just like, so I was
What
always
does that mean
kind of,
exactly?
really, why do you think that? So some of this stuff that kind of was in my head from cycling and seeing the sort of differences in how women were treated in the sport and how much they were supported financially really got me interested and passionate about women's studies and really looking at sort of the reasons why. And the reasons why have to do with studying the history and studying philosophy and studying all the different sort of reasons why we have a certain cultural bias towards a certain race, class, or gender. And so going to grad school was really exciting to me intellectually because I felt like I could combine sort of the thinking side that I liked with philosophy with also getting to do something to make the world a better place. So I shipped myself off to San Diego, and quit cycling, and started being a full-time academic. And then kind of realized that I actually needed both, the outdoor sports side and the sort of intellectual side. I was really glad that I didn't commit to a full PhD program because that was a little bit too much. I struggled with actually writing my master's thesis. I did my thesis on actually gender and technology, so I did a lot of my work in conjunction with a university in Sweden, in Waterbrew, so I got to travel on the EU's dime, which was cool. But if anyone has ever looked at the Quick Left blog and noticed that there's hardly anything written by me, it is because I am terrible at writing, and it's a struggle for me. But on the bright side, what I found in going to grad school kind of by accident was that I'm really interested in writing code, and I'm really good at solving engineering problems. Who knew? So as a grad student, I was able to enroll in sort of what I call my self-directed computer science minor. And even though computer science was an impacted major, as a grad student, I was able to sign up before anyone else. So I was able to kind of, I used the kind of computer science minor guidelines as my guide, and I did take classes like discrete math, even though I didn't need to, but I was trying to follow the little guide. So I was able to kind of gain this other skill that I found that I was really passionate about. So as women's studies and solving all the world's problems became kind of overwhelming, and as I realized I was not great, I'm not a fast reader and I'm not a great writer, I was really lucky to find this other outlet and finish up grad school while working in the industry. So I kind of just started working during the first .com bubble, and while taking computer science classes, also learning on the job. So this is the right kind of context for me with academic backing, but also kind of that real world experience. And that's kind of where it started, my kind of shift into being a developer.
So was that the Quick Left?
Might have been.
You just didn't know it then,
I
right?
didn't know it.
There you go. So you came back out to Colorado because why?
Yeah, that's a great question. So life would have been probably different if I had started my career in the late 90s in San Francisco, but I started in San Diego, which, as you know, is a hotbed of internet things. Not really. But just like a lot of, yeah, just like a lot of small cities and big cities alike, there's a huge, awesome, growing startup scene in San Diego. So it's great to see that. But back when I was there, it was interactive agencies, a lot of real estate. I used to work on the San Diego Charter's website. I happened to take the home page down on opening game day all by myself.
Hey,
So, my claim to fame.
congratulations.
And I remember that day where I pressed the submit button and the WYSIWYG I was using wasn't licensed for the staging server, but they were using the same database. Real smart. And it had that moment of like, oh. Back then people didn't do test-driven development, and there why people do it now, because you suffer enough of these like little incidents, you learn pretty quickly.
The lessons learned.
Lessons learned. So what brought me back to Colorado though was that I started to feel, I was working in interactive agency world, which is kind of stemming from, sort of ad agencies. So there's that history of kind of print and magazines and TV commercials, and they had their process and their way that they did out projects and the way that they completed projects, and that way was not exactly conducive to producing good software. So for instance, a fixed bid, hard deadline project because we have a commercial running is pretty much kind of how things were structured. And by the time the project went through design, the budget and the timelines got smaller and smaller. So by the time me and my team got the project, we had to pull all kinds of heroics to launch on time, which we did. But it wasn't satisfying because it's really hard to take risks when you have such a tight deadline that you know that the only way to get it done is to just do it the same old way you always did. And so right about the end of 2005, there was some kind of new energy happening in the startup scene, as well as new energy in kind of coding methodology. Things like Agile were starting to become bubbling up in conversation. Things like extreme programming, pair programming were starting to become talked about, and these things all really intrigued me. And while I didn't have any luck changing the culture where I was, I got recruited to work at a startup in Boulder. So I was really excited at the chance to be more innovative and push myself as a developer, whereas I had felt like I had kind of stagnated. So at the end of 2006, I put all my stuff in a U-Haul and moved back to Boulder to work for a startup, which was really exciting, really stressful, totally different, and a lot of fun. That's where I
Got back to Boulder.
got back to Boulder.
So you went from, it's kind of interesting, you went from where you were in college to where you are back at this particular stage. So when we talked before, you said you got to the point where you were working at this firm, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, some friends just got together and said we should just do this, right?
In terms of Big Left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before you answer, I want to know a little bit, tell these folks how that happened, but before we do that, let these folks know at least just briefly what Quick Left is.
Sure, absolutely. So Quick Left is, to me, the combination of the best of both worlds, of working at an agency with the variety and fun of being able to invent things and start new projects with the sort of startup innovation piece. So I really, having worked in startups and agencies, I really wanted to combine both things. And I started Quick Left because I was working in another startup, and they had laid off the entire engineering team. And so kind of met up with a couple of guys I had met on Twitter and started doing some just freelance, helping them code on some projects. We realized that we had this really great synergy of talent. So one of the things that's really important when starting a company is, it's funny, people always ask, oh, do you need to be friends with your co-founders, or do you need to have known them, or do you interview them? And in some ways there's a lot of luck to it. I wasn't close friends with my co-founders, and I didn't interview them and try to see if they would be good people to start a company with. It was something that we had developed over maybe 3 months of working together, where we realized that we had complementary enough skills, and it was the right kind of atmosphere with the economy and all these different things that we felt it was worth taking the risk. So that's really what happened. Is we reincorporated Quick Left 2010, January 1st was kind of our first day as a company, and we set out to just build a really cool consulting shop.
So it's interesting that you say you didn't need to know these folks. I've talked to a variety of different co-founders, founder, whatever, and they all say, at least not most of them say, that there has to be a level of, what do they call it? not that they have to know them per se, but there has to be some connection, right?
I think it's core values.
Or Val, okay, I was just
Yeah.
going to ask you, what are the connections that you, with your co-founders, what were some of those things that you thought were important and that they thought were important? You said, well, this is how we're going to move forward.
So we had some really important core values in common. Of course, everyone wants to make money, right? But we were very focused on producing a good product, and that product is our engineering consulting services. So us being able to help other businesses build their products with good coding methodology, testable applications that they could pass on to their teams and feel like they were being well taken care of, things like that. We weren't trying to sell in a year. We weren't trying to grow to 100 people in a year. So there's a lot of like logistical common grounds that we agreed on, and that was really what was important to unite us. So the focus, we weren't trying to be another agency. We didn't want to hire designers. We didn't want to hire project managers. We just wanted to focus on engineering, and that's something that I see a lot of either clients that we talk to or potential clients or other companies that I talk to and mentors. They want to do so many different things to kind of spread out their risk maybe, or they want to try everything and see what sticks. But I think it's really important to be able to focus on one thing and give it long enough to see if it's going to work before getting distracted by a shift or a change of direction. So that's really what worked well for us, is that as a founding team, our belief in a certain direction was what kept us working well together.
So when you evaluated the risk, we talked more about those long-term plans, like when someone comes up and say, what's your 5-year, 10-year? Okay, which is usually kind of interesting. So what were some of the risks that you saw going into this in 2010 with these folks?
Yeah.
And were there any, I'm curious, were there any milestones or whatever that you guys wanted to meet? Yeah, because we talked about the 5-year, that was where you made 5 years, 3 years, but were there some milestones that you guys set when you got together, or whether it was just, we're just going to do this and see what happens?
Here's another thing you need as a co-founding team. You need to be a little bit naive about what you're getting yourself into. So we're like, we got this. We did not see risks, really. We didn't see any risks that we didn't think that we were going to be able to get through. We're like, 2010, there's a recession, the economy is terrible, and we're doing really well, so if the economy gets better, we're only going to do better, right? So we got this. We really, that kind of initial confidence and in some ways blindness to reality, you don't want to be totally blind to reality. Because I've certainly met with people that you're like, have you been on the internet the last 10 years? Because your ideas kind of not worked in many different iterations, but having a little bit of blindness to the reality is helpful when you're starting. Because as you get started, you will certainly find the reality is right there in front of you, and you can't even try to close your eyes to it. So having that kind of excitement and a bit of naivete in the beginning is, I think, a great fuel to start.
So where did you guys see in a year after you guys started?
Oh yeah, the 5-year plan. Okay,
Your wonderful
so I was
5-year
avoiding the question because
I know, because you don't believe in the 5-year plan.
yeah, so we never had a business plan, and people would always ask me questions like, where do you think you're going to be in 5 years? And I always hate that question, and extending that even further as a CEO, I've had people that sort of feel like I should have this grand vision and make large speeches, and that's not really my style. So I like having a direction, but I also don't ever want to be blind to opportunities along the way. And sometimes a 5-year plan, especially when you're in year 0 of your company, can be very, it can take you in a direction and keep you from looking at other things. So I certainly had things that I would tell people so that I had a good story, but what I actually believed was that as we went along, just like in developing agile software, you learn things along the way
you give us an example of what one of those non-planned things were?
Well, you know,
Those
see, it
opportunities?
actually ended up coming true. No. So one of my stories was people are like, why are you opening up this office? Or why are you, we own our space in Fuller. So people are like, why are you buying this space? What are you going to do when you grow out of it? And my answer was, and I believe this, I never wanted an office that has more than 30 people in each office because I really want this sort of culture in each office to be somewhat organic, and I want people to know each other well enough and be able to collaborate in a way that a 30-person office allows you to do. And my way that we're going to grow is we're going to open offices in other states. So that was my story, and that's what we ended up doing.
So you have an office where, Portland?
Portland and San Francisco. So it wasn't that I made up stories to sort of make people happy, but it was sort of like, it wasn't like we had a 5-year plan. In 5 years, we're going to open offices in other cities. It was more sort of like, this is a good idea, and if the opportunities present themselves properly, it'll be something that happens. So yes, as of this year, we merged with a product company called Sprintly. Sprintly is an agile project management tool focusing on sort of good user interface design and good metrics for managers. So your manager can see if is my team working well, or some of the things that I can find out about my team. They are a development shop. Most of their development was done in Portland. So we acquired a Portland office, and then their CEO was based out of San Francisco, so we acquired a San Francisco presence as well. And so for me, here's kind of the deal about sort of startups and consulting and product and all these things. Consulting companies are not exactly, unless you want to just continue to get profit and you're an S corp and you take home your profits, it's a great business. But if you ever want to grow and get acquired, services businesses just don't have the multiples. Your valuation is 1.5 times revenue. It's really not much. So even though we're making millions of dollars, your valuation just isn't anything like the multiples of a product company. So you just have a lot less flexibility. And so in addition to the only way we were going to grow is to open other offices, I also wanted to diversify in revenue. One of the things that's really hard about services companies is that you're always trying to get the next client, and there's some level of stress to that, especially we're not a venture-backed company, so we don't have funding to kind of support hiring that many people ahead of getting the work. So diversifying and having product revenue seemed like such a great way to kind of just have a little bit of balance, or there's some seasonality to consulting. Winter time is really slow, January is really slow. Well, there's also a lot of risk in trying to start your own product within a consulting company. It's very expensive. So when we met Sprintly, they were one of our clients. We helped them rebuild their entire front-end interface. We realized that even though it was still going to be risky, there were a lot of things about the deal that mitigated our risk. So for instance, opening up a new office in a city where there's already an office is a lot less risky than going there from scratch and trying to find a place, trying to insert yourself into the community, and opening up an office. It can be very distracting. It can take you away from the focus that you have, again, back to our roots, core values, which was focusing on good engineering. Finding a new office in a new city is taking you so far away from that. It can distract a whole business. So having those offices already set up was a good risk. And then the other thing that we liked about the situation was that they already had a product that had been around for about 3 years. It had gone through a lot of user testing and had some recurring revenue. So although it certainly has a lot of room to grow, they had passed a certain point to which it wasn't something we were trying to think up in our garage anymore. It was something that had legs that we felt like we could really help take to the next level. So in terms of how I think about opportunity, I would say I tend to have a high tolerance for risky situations, but they're always very informed risks. So my risks aren't, I'm not going to just run out into traffic, but I'm going to say, oh, look, there's a small walkway here and a small rope over here. I think I could walk across traffic slightly assisted. Here we are.
Okay.
So far it's worked out.
That's good. That's good. I was going to ask you about the merger, and so thank you for talking about that. So I want to ask, I want to go back to, you know, the whole female entrepreneur. That's been an interesting subject recently. I know that we had, you know, the 40 Forward thing, Women for Entrepreneur deal and stuff. I think it's interesting to hear different perspectives from, looks like yourself, on what you think of the current environment, and for those folks that are, those women that want to start something. So, you know, did women's studies, right? So you have I think a pretty clear understanding of what you said about some of the differences and stuff. What are some things that you think women can do in the startup world to help them be successful?
Yeah, so kind of similar to, you know, cycling. So, you know, being very young in a male-dominated sport as well, I had a lot of practice being in a world where I wasn't around other people like me. So I'm very used to being the only woman in the room, and I'd say that most of my experiences have been very positive. And probably, I think, sometimes I don't get the joke, so that's in a good way. I don't notice when people are being mean to me, and in some ways that's worked out to my favor. So there have definitely been situations that I'm in where later on someone will say, didn't you notice this thing was happening? And I'm like, whoops, no. So that's the geek nerd in me. You know, sometimes we're socially awkward and we miss things. I do too. But you know, I think that it's really important to find good allies, whether they're men or women, and good partners to collaborate with, whether it's starting a company or working on code, or, you know, I'm on a women's cycling team, having people to ride with. It's really kind of about creating a community that supports you and the things that you're excited about. So if you're excited about starting a company, don't hang out with people that are giving you a hard time about it or questioning kind of your approach. Go hang out with people that are also excited about it, or maybe have advice, or, you know, there's, like we were just talking about, there's so many meetups now. You can kind of spend your whole every night during the week getting free food and free drinks. So lots of really good opportunities that maybe didn't exist a few years ago. So you don't have to like go it solo or, you know, be super tough. If you're not tough, that's okay. You know, there's still a lot of ways you can support your interests.
So who are some mentors that you've had over the years that you can point to and say, yeah, that person really helped me get to X point or whatever? I'm sure there's got to be some,
There's
right?
not. So I'm very introverted, so I was never good at finding mentors that were very far away from me. So a lot of my mentors were my bosses. So when I was in high school, I was on the U.S. team, but cycling team, but I also was on a local all-women's team in Boulder. It was the Zin Alfalfa's team. And they seemed like adults at the time, but they were probably in their 20s at the time. But I had this great group of women who were just totally into sports, and they kind of took me under their wing, and I got a lot of really good influence from this women's team. Grew a lot in my cycling, but also got a chance to see how different ways that you could still do the things you like and still be a woman. So even though I was around a lot of men cyclists, I also had this other kind of place where I did fit in and I did belong. Other mentors have been in graduate school. My thesis chair has been a great mentor, Pat Muckle. She was the one that actually encouraged me to take a web class. Actually, it was a requirement. She made it a requirement. So, you know, San Diego State, having the first Women's Studies master's degree program in the United States, had a professor there who thought it was very important that we all knew how to make a website as part of the Women's Studies curriculum. How awesome is that? And she encouraged me and to sort of do this computer science minor and really kind of supported me when some of the other professors were sort of like, you know, why are you doing this other thing? You're gonna have trouble finishing, which was true, but worked out. And then later on, I had this really great boss at one of my first web dev shops, which was also happened to be a woman, Laura Wilbur. She was just really great and had this it was kind of, actually all my jobs, I was one of the first employees there, so I learned a lot. She was a great early example for me. So, you know, you don't have to kind of find this like grand mentor. I think a lot of people feel like they have to find a famous mentor. They're always, you know, emailing Brad Feld, can you be my mentor? There's a lot that you can actually get just from somebody that's close to you, you know, a boss, even a peer that's got more experience than you. So, you know, it doesn't have to be like a big grand thing. It can be very small and it can be very local.
Cool. Yeah, I think that mentors sometimes can be, like you said, they don't have to be anybody huge or incredibly dynamic or whatever. They can just be, like you said,
Good listeners.
good listeners.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you about, you said 30 people to an office, and that creates what you said as a culture. Can you describe what you mean by culture and what does that look like at quick level?
So the thing I like about 30 people is that it's big enough so that you can have enough variety and different people that you get to talk to and have a lot of diversity of opinion, which is really important. But also it's not too big that you don't know everyone there, and it's not too big that you have to solve culture issues with policy. So when you get into a bigger company, you have to mandate like fun day, or you might have to have a cultural programs to make sure people are having fun. But the nice thing about having an office that's you know, less than 30 is that people can kind of take on those roles and contribute to the culture of the place in their own way without it having to run through the admin department or be set up. You know, they can just organize a lunch, organize a happy hour. And those little kind of one-offs or chances to kind of collide outside of the typical work infrastructure also lead to a lot of creativity and connection. And so part of that, you know, being a great team and working really well together are those connections. And so having a place that people don't feel lost in, I think is key to that. So that's why it's 30.
That's cool. So if you were to use a word or 3 words to describe the culture, what would that be?
Okay, I think, so the culture is definitely fun, but people are really passionate about their work. So people are really excited about the code they're writing and the things they're producing, but then they also have fun. So there's, you know, we have a kegerator, but it's not a programmer culture. You can solve for fun, and you don't have to be boring. So fun, passionate, and then I think caring and collaborative. I'll say collaborative, it's such a buzzword, but people are genuinely interested in helping each other learn and grow. So we have a lot of people at different levels, and people are really excited to, you know, either learn a new technology that no one knows or help a junior person learn within the office.
Cool. So what do you see that as being kind of the major challenges that you guys had you and your co-founders during the last, what,
Almost 5 years.
5 years? And what are some that you can see, if you can look out, or what are some challenges that you think are going to be ones that you guys are going to have to deal with?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest challenges challenges that we went through that a lot of startups go through is that we had a co-founder who needed to leave. And that, especially when you're starting out, can be a very emotional experience because you go into things with this commitment and everyone's sacrificing a lot, their time, all their paychecks, all kinds of things to kind of get to this place. And this place might not be very well defined, so you're like, when do you stop running 100 miles an hour? And so sometimes there's casualties, and sometimes the place that you're trying to get to isn't actually where everyone, even though they kind of said that's where they wanted to go, when it gets to that place, maybe it's not quite as great as it seemed. And so that point at which people have to become honest and say, I need out or I need a vacation is such a hard point to get to because there's so much, you don't want to let people down, you don't want to feel like you've not succeeded, but sometimes it's just better to take a different direction. So there's all kinds of hard emotions around that, and I would say that's probably one of the most difficult things I've gone through just even in my life. And I come from a divorced family and all these things, so that was definitely something, and it's something I didn't expect either. Especially when you start, everyone's excited. You have remember I was talking about don't be a little naive, and so we were, and so then it sort of hits you a little bit across the face. So that's one of the biggest challenges. The other challenge we had actually wasn't starting the business during the recession. It was actually what happened as we were getting out of the recession. So we were able to hire people really cheaply. We didn't have any funding. We were able to bill up front. So we were able to get enough money to run payroll. And yes, we cut it very close many times, but it worked out. But as the investors started reinvesting in startups and things started picking up, developer salaries grew, and we had to match those to be competitive. It was very difficult to compete for talent because we couldn't throw money at culture problems. We didn't have a nice giant VC bank account to just hire all the people we wanted to hire. So if we didn't get a project, we might miss out on hiring somebody we really wanted. That was hard. That was like, the world's so unfair because we have such a great place and they're going to that lame place just because they're getting offered more money. And they should think about money. People should think about their livelihoods and their future. There's nothing wrong with that. So that was definitely a challenge that we've overcome as we've just continued to grow. Another challenge has been that all of my competition has moved to Boulder. So many similar shops have now opened offices in Boulder. A couple of my old bosses have shops like mine, so I'm competing with them. So that's also been something I always said, people are like, who's your biggest competition? And I always said it's the shop that hasn't started yet. And I was kind of right. Awful. It's actually worse. It's the shop that already has a well-established big city office to send work to their satellite Boulder office, who's also competing with me for business and developers. So that's been another hurdle to kind of get through. So obviously the merger was a big move to A, diversify in revenue, and B, diversify geographically so that we can also have offices in a big city and compete and be able to continue to compete with the other shops.
So do you see, you mentioned, and I was going to ask this question about talent. I hear all the time. I mean, I think about there's a lack of, good talent. And, especially from a developer perspective. It's hard to find developers. It's hard to visit. Do you see that? No? Okay.
We do not have a hard time finding good developers.
Okay.
You know why? Good developers want to work with other good developers, and they want to work on projects that they're really excited about, and they want to work at environments that they can thrive in. So if you've got a place where you're working people really hard and you're not letting them do test-driven development and you're not letting them practice Agile, they're going to get burned out really fast. It's going to be really hard to hire good talent because there's so many other places that are offering environments that are conducive to good software process and good software development.
Okay. You're the first person to say that. That's interesting. No, I mean, I think it's great that you work with good people, but I've heard over time and time again that there's this lack of talent out there.
There's a lot of up and coming talent, which is really great, and there's definitely more software needs than we're not pumping out enough computer science graduates to fill, and there's a lot on a global scale that we have to be concerned about. But I think if you want to attracting good talent is definitely something that we haven't had a hard time doing.
Awesome. Well, I want to open this up for a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
I love it when other people
Is
talk.
that okay? You love it when other people talk? All right. Does anybody have any quick questions for Ingrid? Not quick, but just, yes.
Maybe it's not financial, but what was the moment where you knew that Quick Left was going to be okay?
I don't know if it still is. No. I had this friend in grad school who wanted to open a restaurant, and she said, in the restaurant business, if you make it past year 3, then you're solid. And so for some reason, I always had this year 3 in my mind, but ironically, in between year 3 and 4 was like the worst year ever for me. So it sort of worked, but it also, it was like I tripped and caught myself and then ran into the wall at the same time.
So now it's year 5, year 6?
Yeah, getting to, yeah. No, so now I feel a lot more like we're finally getting somewhere, because we're actually starting to attract some really good talent, not just in engineering, but also in other things like sales, marketing. So people are starting to be interested in working with us that used to maybe not think it was worth the risk. That's a good sign, I think.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
You mentioned that you talked about core values. You mentioned and talked a lot about culture. I think that's really great. Did you codify your core values? Do you actually have them delineated out, or are they sort of the 4 things you just said earlier, or whatever it was?
Yeah, that's been a little bit of one of those things that, along with my 5-year plan and my business plan that I never wrote. No, so we have not done the greatest job with formally writing up our core values, but part of that is I definitely had some people early on that worked with me that were very upset that I hadn't kind of put them on our walls and things like that. And it's hard to define your core values when you're still trying to figure out what you're doing, where you're going. I think it's okay if you're only 3 years old to not kind of know. And I also think it's cool when you're a company like Patagonia and you can write a book called Let Your People Go Surfing because you've had lots of years of experience. But you can't just read that book and say, Ingrid, why don't you have all this stuff figured out? So my advice to people and startups is it's really good to align, especially as a founding team, around some core values, but don't be too hard on yourself if you haven't figured out your Six Sigma. Just kind of let it marinate, let it iterate, and then you can get to a certain place where we are now, where we're big enough now people actually need that direction. We're too big for the core values to just kind of transfer by osmosis. You really do need to start defining things for people. So yes, now we are.
So that's your homework for next year.
And we've had them on our intranet and things, and we've never done a great job at making sure when people start on day 1, here is our core values.
I mean, but passionate, fun, caring, collaborative is a pretty good.
But then they
set of
come and
core.
that's what they are, and that's what they get. So, I guess maybe also part of me feels like it's the same thing as having a huge budget and throwing money at culture and throwing money at people to get them to work for you. Just saying that you have these certain values doesn't necessarily mean that they're being practiced. So maybe I'm not that great at sort of messages and calling things out in the office, but I'm really great at making sure that these things are actually happening in the office. And I think that's more important.
I like that. Any other questions? No one? Yes.
What's the worst advice you've ever received?
That's a good one. What's the worst advice you've ever received?
So, I actually, yes. Someone who's really smart and has sold his company for some $146 million in the Valley told me that it wasn't very smart for me to buy my office space. And I was like, and why is that? So, being a consulting company, you're not trying to kind of turn over your company and grow really big as a product background. So obviously, there's a totally different strategy. So even though he was very successful and has done a million things right, he said that it was stupid of me to buy my office space, which just wasn't the right fit for the model.
In
So
Boulder,
I
you
ignored
bought
him.
your office space?
I bought my office space
Yeah.
on 9th and Pearl.
It's very nice office space. You get a chance to go look at it.
Someday I'll be like,
It's awesome.
kind of gave me a hard time about it at the time.
So you sound very driven, and I'm just wondering how you strike a balance, a work-life balance, and you find that you don't have balance, you do.
Well, I'm not a perfectionist. I get a lot of sleep. I also, I actually got back into racing probably in 2009. So I'm not racing this year, and I didn't race the year I started Left, but I sprinkle in racing in between. Racing is this great stress release because you have to train, so you have a goal, you have people to ride with, and then when you're actually in a pack racing, you can't actually remember that you just got yelled at by a client, for instance, the day before. It just happened. But at the same time, racing can also be really demanding. I still race at the Cat 2 level, which is for women. I still race with professionals who just, that's all they do. So it can be a little counterproductive sometimes to do that all the time because it does take so much time. So I let myself take time off here and there. But yeah, I think the real key is pick some things that are not work related that you also have a community attached to, and I'm really driven by or motivated by like peer pressure. So I don't like to let people down. So if I said I was going to ride with so and so, I don't like to cancel. So that's how I set myself up to like forced balance. And then just the whole perfectionist thing, like things don't have to 100% be fully done. You don't have to answer the emails before you go to bed. You don't have to check your email at 10 p.m. Get good sleep, eat well. I quit drinking coffee, amazingly. I thought I could never do that.
That makes a difference.
Actually, it does. But it's also probably because I'm getting older and I'm more sensitive to the caffeine. But yeah, you've got to create your time. Set your boundaries and create time. And you don't do anyone any good by, I remember when we first started actually, is coming back from kind of the agency world, there was an expectation of this, wearing a pager where you were always available. The client needed to call at 10 p.m. and you answered. And we actually took a very clear stance that we weren't going to answer client phone calls after hours, and if we did, we were only encouraging them to call more often. So kind of another related thing was, what we learned is we never got in trouble when we said no. We always got in trouble when we said yes. So whether that be overcommitting, overcommitting to deadlines, overcommitting to getting stuff done that creates imbalance, saying no is a good word to keep your sanity.
Yes.
For those that are just starting out or are thinking about it, what's the first couple of things that come to your head when you think about things you wish you would have known before you started? So what's the diff or what's the hard lessons that they're probably going to learn?
Well, some of the not knowing was actually good Because I think if you know like some of the things you're gonna have to face, it's very stressful. You almost don't want to know. But I think my biggest lesson of what I wished I would have known is something I think about a lot. When I like someone, I envision like all these possibilities for them at the left in terms of like staff. And I have hired the most awesome people for the most awful roles, and I've probably lost a few friends because they were so miserable in the end. So I think you have to almost like separate the personality and the thing you like about that person with kind of the practicality of the role and what you're trying to do for your company. And it's this mistake I've made over and over, and I get suckered back in because I think, oh, this person is really great. And then the other thing that's weird that you forget is that you might be really great at wearing a bunch of different hats because you're an entrepreneur, and you don't realize that other people maybe need structure and instruction. And that was another big sort of surprise to me, is that along with hiring people for the wrong role, because sure, you've done a bunch of wrong roles, but you're an entrepreneur, not everyone is that flexible, and not everyone can work well and thrive with little direction. So those are some, building a team is very hard, but it's my favorite thing to do. So it's very challenging. It's like the only reason why people like, do you miss writing code? And I'm like, yes, but I get to do all these other really cool things I never really thought about. They're fun and hard.
That's hard. That's good.
Do you still, so you're running your business, but you're still coding a lot?
No coding at all.
No coding at all?
That goes along with the balance. I could go home and code at night, but for me, it's really important to take a break from the computer, to go outside, to ride my bike, to cook dinner with my husband, things like that. Yeah, I think sometimes there's a lot of pressure, especially as developers, to have like a bunch of side projects and you have to do all these other things, but sometimes you just need to step away from the computer and run around the block a few times. Put your Mountain Dew down. Your Red Bull.
One more question. Yes, sir.
So as a CEO, your job tends to evolve with the company, and I think that the best CEOs are able to sort of see around corners and go willingly into that new role, as opposed to, in hindsight, figuring out it's too late when things are on fire. So can you talk a little bit about how your role has shifted as time has gone on, and talk a little bit about your struggles of sort of maybe recognizing too late that you should have been doing things, and if you've gotten better at that, how have you gotten better at that?
It's funny, I actually, along with really being skeptical of everyone, it's not that I don't trust them, but I'm very inquisitive. I'm also, for some reason, I'm really great at anticipating things, so I definitely feel like I can see around the corner. I mean, even in racing, I was like, hardly ever crashed, because I was always like, I don't think that's good over there, I'm gonna move over here. So being very introverted, I am a detail noticer. I'm always kind of picking up patterns and things like that. So if anything, I think I tend to notice things and then second guess myself. Like, oh, I'm just noticing too many things, or oh, it's only bothering me. So that's probably been my struggle more often than not, is that that balance between letting people do things their way, which I'm a very hands-off kind of manager, versus noticing when things are actually kind of going off the rails, figuring out when to kind of pull back or help. In terms of like, have I felt like I've missed opportunities? I don't feel that way. I don't feel like there are a couple of times where we maybe lost a job that we were outbid on, and maybe we should have underbid and won it, and maybe that would open certain doors. But I don't feel like we've made decisions that have taken us in the wrong direction. And we've been very lucky about that.
Sounds like things are going well.
It's been really fun. Thank you. all so much for
Well,
coming.
thank you for coming tonight. So Ingrid's going to be here for a little while longer, so if you have any other questions or whatever, just feel free. Okay, sound good?
Yes, I will get you a drink and I will leave.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Really, that's exciting.